Everybody having a good time so far? Yeah. I should just let him give my presentation. He just completely compartmentalized everything I was going to say into about 4 paragraphs. So thank you for that. I do have a marginally interesting story, at least I think so. I've been a serial entrepreneur since college and spent a vast majority of my time over the last decade growing companies and running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to figure out what to do with my time. And been very successful at that, and now I'm joined forces with Dev Digital as their Director of Startup Equity and Joint Ventures. We're a very innovative software development company doing some pretty cool stuff, and all the great things we've been learning about the stats of Nashville make it even more encouraging to be going down the path that we are. But before I dive into some great ways to really use LinkedIn, I want to rewind history 18 months and talk about how my life changed, what really brought me back into using LinkedIn. I joined in 2010, had a decent number of connections, 400 and something, but I thought I was a cool kid on the block with 400 connections. But rewinding 18 months ago, I went from running a multi-million-dollar company to finding out that I was supposed to be dead. And on a Wednesday, I found out that I was having a rather massive brain hemorrhage. You see that little glow there. And driving back to my office to hopefully close a $500,000 deal, I got a phone call, and they said, "Hey John, what are you doing right now?" I said, "Well, I just left you guys getting that done. Going back to my office, what's up?" I said, "Well, you need to go to the hospital right now." And so I turned around, drove myself back to the hospital, and an hour later, there I am, wired up in ICU, being bombarded by neurologists and neurosurgeons, all flabbergasted that I was being able to carry on a high-level conversation, let alone driven myself to the hospital. Well, 2 days later, somebody was making a joke earlier about Mr. T. Well, I was impersonating a white version of Mr. T 2 days later, and I'm sparing you all the pictures of 27 staples in the side of my head and whatnot. But anyway, very long story short, not too long after this, not all, but a significant portion of the people that I was doing business with, that I considered my great friends and would always be there for me, as soon as they found out that, wow, this guy is supposed to be dead, they magically didn't see the value in me. And long story short, I recovered and came back, didn't have to do any therapy. I'm literally a walking miracle. But I found myself alone. And without people there that used to always be there for me, they were gone. So I'm sitting there figuring out, okay, well, I've been heavily involved in digital marketing and technology development and had all these diatribes I used to give my clients, but I was ignoring my own advice. I wasn't drinking my own Kool-Aid. How many of you guys in here find yourselves not drinking your own Kool-Aid? Well, last December, I really decided to dive into becoming active on LinkedIn again. But I was trying to figure out the best way to spend my time. And I'm wagering that everybody in this room has dealt with these issues. Those seem pretty familiar to everybody? Trying to figure out what we're going to do with our time, and especially from a connection standpoint, networking, and a marketing perspective. As a business owner and an executive of any kind, you're trying to figure out what's the best way to spend my time and my money to get the most return, right? And especially in the B2B world, you're dealing with the high-level decision maker, and oftentimes they're guarded by what? There you go, gatekeepers. And I started doing a little bit of research and saw studies that showed that one of the greatest ways to circumvent gatekeepers was to go through LinkedIn. InMail is a fantastic tool that enables you to directly connect with people or message people that you're not connected with. Well, last December, I decided I wanted to start a podcast for entrepreneurs called Let's Talk Serious Startups. And I wanted to connect and interview people that were very influential, venture capitalists, people that were very, very successful. And let's get real, I'm a nobody. How the heck am I going to get a big dog on board if I try to go through a gatekeeper? They're going to say no in an instant. Well, I decided, well, I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to believe the research that I've seen. And started shooting out in-mails to different people of influence. And I was looking on my stat sheet. One of the most influential person I have a connection with is Gary Swart. He was the CEO of Odesk, and now he just exited. Now he's a VC. I sent him a message, spoke to him on a human level. I figured that as an entrepreneur himself, he probably was getting to that stage where it was time to start sharing his knowledge with those that were up and coming. So I really approached him from that perspective. Hey, do you want to help share your knowledge? I'm trying to help educate people who want to become like you. There's a little bit of ego play there, I'm not going to lie. But long story short, it worked. It worked. That kind of really kicked things off for me, and I started leveraging that angle and ended up interviewing Alan Weber when he was running for governor. He was the founder of Fast Company, and John Bradsford, he's one of the top players at Techstars, now the MD of London. But we've had great conversations, and it really enabled me to build human connections as I shared my story with them and they shared their story with me. We were able to connect on a personal level that, as we all know, who you know helps you meet other people that you want to know. And being able to leverage introduction and functionality of LinkedIn is very, very powerful when they're seeing who you're connected with. This leads me up to what Renee was talking about earlier on how LinkedIn has opened up the opportunity for all of us to publish on LinkedIn. I got started in I think the end of April, and I'm gonna skip that one. That's boring. Forgot where I was going with this. Okay, so before I dive into that, this is a preface to writing and publishing your thoughts and becoming a thought leader on LinkedIn. I want you to think about this statement right here. We're all like islands in the sea, separate on the surface, but connected in the deep. And that, to me, going through all the things that I had just gone through, I really wanted to find those little snippets of connection that LinkedIn provided and be able to bring things together and no longer just be standing on an island by myself. So when the ability to publish came out, I really started to dive into it. As you can see here, I went bonkers. And some of my articles have been featured on Pulse, some have not, some have been viewed 50 times, some have been viewed thousands of times. But I've really tried to share my experiences and my personal knowledge and things that I've learned from others with the people who are out there. And as a business leader, as somebody looking for a job, if you have the opportunity to create a position of thought leadership and really share who you are as a human, the opportunities for all of us to connect, and you never know who's going to be reading it. I had a gentleman, I whited out everybody's name, but very, very influential man, built a very successful company. And he shot me a message after I changed my author description, saying that just being a father first. That was the first thing that I wanted to talk about. Well, he emailed me and said, "It's great to see a man describe himself as a father first." And then dove into, "Hey, I've got a new venture that I'd really like to talk to you about. I've been following and reading everything you've been saying for the last several months. Let's get together and talk." And so we're now talking back and forth about a few different things, but it's a great example of why it's so important to share our knowledge from a personal perspective and then leverage the power that LinkedIn gives us. You know, with entrepreneurship in Pulse, the entrepreneurship and innovation category has almost 5 million people that follow it. 5 million. That's a heck of a lot. And if you get an article featured, that's an amazing amount of opportunity from a business development perspective, or maybe if you're looking for a job. The employer reads about it. Hey, I actually like where this guy's going. Jennifer's going to be talking later on about the power of recruiting. And we all know that people go and view your profile on LinkedIn. Well, great, I can have all this stats about myself, and hey, here's where I work, and here's my skill set. That doesn't enable you to really share your perspective on it. And we all know that that is ultimately, at the end of the day, the most important thing in hiring decisions, whether it be you being hired as a company or you being hired as an employee. Any fact becomes important when it's connected to another. So Dev Digital is an innovative software development company. And a couple months ago, I decided that, well, very long story short, I had avoided networking events like the plague. One, for about a year and a half. One, because I had a lopsided mohawk and a big scar on the side of my head. I didn't want to be the weird guy walking around. But the real reason I had avoided them was so often, as soon as somebody found out I owned a business, it turned into a sales pitch to me. And I spent the next 3 weeks dodging emails and phone calls with somebody trying to sell me something. How many people in this room have had that experience? I figured a few of you might. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to put together an event that is only for executives, business owners, higher level decision makers, and there's going to be literally no agenda other than let's get together and have peer-to-peer conversation. Then, circling back around my point earlier of getting around gatekeepers, I initially tried to make a few phone calls to people, and it was, oh, it's another guy trying to get us to come over to some event to sell us something, right? Well, I said, I'm going to leverage LinkedIn, circumvent all the gatekeepers, connect on a human level, and see what happens. So I started, oops, where'd it go? I messed up my order. There we go. So I started sending out messages on LinkedIn, very personal. Thanks for connecting with me. If it was a new connection, I'd like to invite you over here. There's no agenda. Let's have some wine, some food, some great conversation. If something comes from it, cool. If not, no big deal. You probably know somebody that might do business with me later as well. One of the reactions that I did not expect came from Ken, and he wasn't able to come, but he said, hey, guess what? I'm in the market for having some software developed. I'd like to talk to you. So I ended up calling him up. We had a conversation that day, and fast forward a month and a half, he's now a client. Well, it's 3 months now. He's now a client. We're doing some pretty interesting stuff for him. But all this is circling back around to the point I'm making about the human connection. The invite, not just using LinkedIn as a way to broadcast myself, but to connect with like-minded individuals with opportunities that we could all enjoy and have a value proposition for all of us. You know, we're so often in business, we're always, it's misbalanced. Hey, what's in it for me, not what's in it for both of us. And I think if we really start to leverage LinkedIn, whether you're publishing articles, connecting people, making discussion topics in groups, there's so many powerful tools available to us to create those connections and showcase the value proposition, which can lead to, in my opinion, the greatest avenue of sales, which is people reach out to you are easier to close than people you reached out to. How many people in this room would agree with that statement? I mean, let's get real. There's a reason that search optimization has been such a powerful business development tool. Cold calling it's not dead completely, but it's much harder than it once was. Now, I'm going to rewind because I messed up my order. But don't start conversations like Fred. I got after I published an article about raising capital for a startup, I opened up my email and it's, how about you get off your ass and send me $250,000. I was entertained, but I was so stunned by that approach, I didn't respond. Well, his next message was, where's my 250K? So I couldn't resist. I had a little bit of a chuckle about it, but I really started thinking about the human connection aspect. And of the people I wagered he was reaching out to, I'm way down here on the totem pole. So I sent a message back to him and said, I'm assuming you've been messaging me like this as a way to get a response. That said, it's not appreciated, and I honestly hope you haven't communicated with people who have much greater influence than me in the same manner. Well, his response was rather interesting. He ended up blocking me on LinkedIn, and it was pretty entertaining. But I just kind of thought about it, and this happened 2 weeks ago, by the way. I was trying to figure out what the heck do I want to talk about in this presentation, and Fred gave me a nice little anecdote to share with folks on how not to connect with folks on LinkedIn. So circling back around to what I was saying on the creating the human connection and taking it from online to offline, I decided to do what? Put together an event for executives that share like-minded opinions and get together and have a great conversation. So I put together I'm messing up on remotes here. Well, it's not showing my slideshow. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of pictures in that slide that aren't showing. Of us all having a great time, having food, drinks, and great conversation. The event starts at 6:30 and generally don't wrap up till about 11:45. Out back having the after party, smoking cigars and drinking some scotch. But it's a great time, and business has been developed from it for us at Dev Digital, but also for a lot of the people that have attended. They've all relayed to me over and over and over again, why aren't there more things like this? Why is there always an agenda? I've got 6 new clients out of this, and we're only averaging 40, 50 people coming to these events, but every single one of them is a decision maker, and they're the hardest people to get a hold of and all get in the same room to ultimately make that connection point. So I'd really like to dive into what can you guys do next and why is it so important for you to do so. So circling back around to publishing, for example, outside of just being a thought leader, there's great opportunities from a search optimization perspective. LinkedIn has a very, very powerful domain. Google therefore indexes it extremely rapidly. And I've had articles that I've published picked up by other publications around the globe, literally around the globe, and they have published things that I've talked about. The connections, as my connections have developed, I said 18 months ago I had 400 and something connections. Now I'm up over 1,500. So 150% growth in less than a year. not doing a whole bunch, and a significant portion of those, over 60% of those, are people who have reached out to me as a result of action in discussion groups, writing articles, sharing my knowledge and experiences. Not to say that I know everything, but I have my own personal perspective of what I've gone through. And so often we become consumed with the concept of keeping everything so professional, not from a writing perspective and the language you're using and all those kind of things, but just here's what we do inside this little box. Not how does it affect you, me, my employees, everybody involved as a human being. And the second you start to do that, you'll be amazed at the comments that start coming to the things that you publish. And often, and beyond that, not just the comments, but the amounts of times it'll be shared, which then does what? Exposes your opportunity for additional connections, business, opportunity, which is what we're all out here to do. And I would assume that a significant portion of us in here are in this room right now to figure out ways to leverage LinkedIn to create greater opportunities for ourselves. Is that a fair supposition? So, how much time do I have left? 2 minutes? Awesome. Check boxes. Take time to connect. Share your knowledge. Think big picture. Don't think only in the microcosm of how is this going to affect me today or tomorrow, but what are my opportunities if I build these human connections on a much larger scale to be successful and grow my own influence. And ultimately, one of the things I really want to close with is be one of the few. As Renee was talking earlier, LinkedIn opened up the opportunity to publish back in April, I think, to everybody, April or May. Very few people, I mean, it's growing on a daily basis, but there's still a minuscule fraction of the total members of LinkedIn that are publishing. What does that give us all? An opportunity to become thought leaders at an accelerated rate that we won't have if we take too long to take action. And in closing, it's worth your time. I have generated, I won't put the numbers on it, but a significant amount of business leads and relationships have been developed. People are reaching out to me on a regular basis. Different opportunities that have been part of a macro goal for myself have started to formulate together. And instead of circle back to what I said earlier about it's always easier when they come to you versus you going to them, a lot of the people of key influence that I've really wanted to connect with and build a relationship, they have begun to reach out to me. And a significant portion of them have all stated it's what led me to talk to you and reach out was I felt like I was able to connect with you as a human being from what you wrote. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, I don't have time to write. Well, that's probably true. Jennifer and I were having an argument about this earlier on why it's so important. But we have time to do so many things. If this is an opportunity for us all to become more well-known, then to be blunt, we're being idiots not to leverage that power. So that's really all I've got to say. And the very final thing is, I started this whole thing off talking about creating human connections and why LinkedIn and how LinkedIn has been so powerful for me personally. I now today have the opportunity to stand before you all, share my experience, what happened to me from a personal perspective, how it's affected me in my life and shifted my focuses into other opportunities. And that is all a result of goofing around and writing a bunch of stuff on LinkedIn. So if that doesn't speak to the potential power of LinkedIn, then, well, I guess we're all idiots.